You're no longer part of this family." The words hit Lily harder than any slap could. Her parents, Robert and Sarah, had just handed her the papers that would disown her for good. She sat frozen, unable to move as her mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. How did it come to this? She had been the dutiful daughter, always showing up, always doing what was expected. Yet here she was, cast aside like an unwanted stranger. Her hand trembled as she reached for the envelope, the papers inside a cold reminder of the betrayal that had been unfolding for months. She could feel the sting of their eyes on her, the silent judgment they threw her way, but she couldn't bring herself to look up. It was as if the ground beneath her feet had been pulled away, leaving her hanging in the air. Lily had always been the one to keep the peace, to smooth over the cracks in the family, but now she was the one being discarded. As she sat there, she realized something. This wasn't just about the papers. It wasn't just about her parents' decision to throw her away. It was about the years of manipulation, the subtle ways they had controlled her life, the way they had always expected her to be there when they needed her, but had never truly valued her. Sarah's cold eyes met hers for a brief moment, and Lily couldn't help but notice the lack of emotion in them. There was no sorrow, no remorse. Just an empty, calculating gaze. "We've been trying to tell you for a while, Lily," Sarah said, her voice flat. "You're not fit for this family. We've given you enough chances to prove yourself." Robert nodded in agreement, his silence speaking volumes. The weight of the moment pressed down on Lily's chest, but she refused to let them see how much it hurt. Instead, she stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. She wasn't going to let them see her break. "Not now. I may not be part of this family anymore," she said, her voice steady, though the ache in her heart was almost unbearable. "But you'll regret this. I promise you." As she turned to leave, the finality of the moment sunk in. She wasn't just walking away from the family dinner. She was walking away from a lifetime of expectations and betrayal. The door shut behind her with a quiet click, and for the first time in a long while, Lily felt free. But that freedom came at a cost, and she would make them pay for it. I stood outside the house, the cold air biting at my skin, but it didn't matter. It was nothing compared to the chill I felt in my heart. I had spent my entire life trying to be the daughter they wanted, trying to be the person they could count on. And now it was all gone. I hadn't even had a chance to fight back before they'd taken everything from me. As I walked away from the front door, I could hear the faint sound of my parents inside, still talking as if nothing had happened. My stomach twisted, but I refused to let the tears come. They weren't worth my pain anymore. I had done enough for them. They had their perfect little world, and I was no longer a part of it. The drive back to my apartment was long, filled with nothing but the hum of the engine and the thoughts racing through my mind. What was I supposed to do now? Where did I go from here? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in the shadows, waiting for them to decide my fate. I needed to take control. The apartment was silent when I stepped inside. The smell of the empty space was familiar, comforting even, in a way. It was my place now, my little sanctuary where no one could tell me what to do. I set the papers from the dinner on the kitchen table, staring at them for a long moment. I had no idea how my parents could do this to me. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was the way they had stripped me of everything, my identity, my worth, my place in their lives. I knew I had to make them see what they had done, but I wasn't sure how. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the table, the papers in front of me, and thought about what I could do next. I had never been a person to back down, but this was different. They had never seen me like this. They didn't know how strong I could be, but I was about to show them. The next day, I made the first phone call. It wasn't a pleasant one, but it had to be done. I called the lawyer I had worked with years ago, the one who had helped me with my first property investment, the one who had seen me at my best and worst. He answered on the first ring, his voice warm and familiar, but there was something in it that I couldn't place. "Lily, what's going on?" "It's been a while." I told him about what had happened, about the dinner, about the papers. He didn't say much, just listened, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "You have to fight this, Lily," he finally said. "You have the right to your inheritance, and I know just the way to go about it." A part of me wanted to laugh, to dismiss the idea, but another part, the part that had been broken and discarded, felt a spark of something. Hope. Revenge? It didn't matter. I was going to make them pay. I had to. That evening, I sat down with the papers again, the envelope still sitting on the table like a symbol of everything they had taken from me. But I was done being their doormat. I was done letting them dictate my life. I would take back what was mine, no matter what it took. And that was only the beginning. I didn't expect them to come for me so soon. It had only been a few days since the papers had been filed, but already, the weight of the situation had started to settle in. My parents, Robert and Sarah, had always thought they knew best. They thought they could make decisions for me, control my life, but now, they were the ones losing control. I had been prepared for this moment, but nothing could fully prepare me for the reality of what was happening. The first letter came in the mail. It was an official notice from their lawyer, demanding that I drop the lawsuit or face further legal action. The nerve of them. They thought they could intimidate me, make me back down. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had worked too hard to get here, too long to let them walk all over me again. The next day, I called. The lawyer. We're not backing down, I told him. I'm not giving up on this. I'm not letting them push me around anymore. He reassured me that the case was solid and that they were just trying to scare me. Keep going. You're doing the right thing, he said. I could hear the confidence in his voice, and it gave me a little more strength. As I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the legal papers, I realized something important. This wasn't just about the inheritance or the house. It was about something deeper, something more personal. It was about dignity. It was about showing my parents that I was worth more than they had ever given me credit for, that I didn't need them to define me. The phone rang, and for a moment, I hesitated. I didn't want to answer. I knew who it was, but I picked up anyway. Lily, we need to talk, Sarah said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it before. Why are you doing this? Why are you making everything so difficult? I could feel her desperation, her frustration, but I didn't feel bad. I had spent my whole life trying to make her happy, trying to be what they wanted, and all it had done was tear me apart. I'm not making things difficult, Mom, I replied, my voice steady. I'm standing up for myself. Something I should have done a long time ago. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. This isn't you, Lily, she said finally. You've always been so understanding, so willing to forgive. Not this time, I said, my voice firm. Not anymore. There was another silence, but this time, it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of before. This was different. This was the silence of realization. She knew. She knew that I wasn't going to back down. And for the first time, I felt a sense of power. Not the kind of power that came from controlling others, but the kind of power that came from taking control of my own life. As I hung up the phone, I looked around the apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And that was enough for now. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their approval to move forward with my life. I had everything I needed right here, and I wasn't going to let them take it away from me. I sat at my kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound filling the silence. The weight of the past few days hung heavily in the air. Everything had changed. My parents, Robert and Sarah, had made it clear that they didn't want me in their lives anymore, but I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to let them have the final say. The phone call from my lawyer earlier had made things clear. This fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The court date was set, and the papers were all in order. As I reviewed everything again, I couldn't help but think back to how everything had gotten to this point. How many times had I stood by, sacrificing my own happiness, just to keep the peace? Too many times. I had always been the one to smooth things over, to take the back seat and let others have the spotlight. But now, that had all changed. My phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Sarah. For a moment, I hesitated. I wasn't sure what she could possibly say to me now, but I answered anyway. Lily. Sarah's voice came through, sounding tired. Can we talk? This whole thing, it's gone too far. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I think you're the one who's gone too far, Mom. You and Dad made your decision. You chose to disown me, and I'm not going to just let that slide. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't say anything at first. I never wanted it to end like this, Sarah said finally, her voice softer now, almost pleading. We thought it was the best thing for everyone. For you too. I felt a pang of something. Hurt, maybe. But it wasn't enough to make me change my mind. You thought it was best for me. I repeated, the words cold in my mouth. I'm done being your pawn, Mom. I'm done being the one who always has to take the fall for everyone else's mistakes. There was another silence. This one was heavier, filled. with regret and realization. Lily, she began, but I cut her off. No, Mom. It's too late for apologies. You made your choice. And now I'm making mine. I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't need her excuses. I didn't need her guilt. What I needed was to finish what I had started. This wasn't about winning or losing in the traditional sense. This was about me standing up for myself, for once in my life. The rest of the evening was spent preparing. I went through my notes, organizing everything for the court. I knew this fight wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. When the day of the court hearing arrived, I put on my best suit. It wasn't about the clothes, but about the statement they made. I was going to walk into that courtroom and show them that I was no longer the little girl they could control. As I sat in the courtroom, waiting for the proceedings to start, I could feel the tension building. This was the moment when everything changed. I wasn't going to be silenced anymore. I wasn't going to be ignored. And for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. I felt in control. I walked into the courtroom with my head held high, every step measured, every motion deliberate. It wasn't just a battle over property or inheritance anymore. It was a fight for my dignity, for my right to exist on my own terms. The air was thick with anticipation as I took my seat, the cold wooden chair beneath me a sharp reminder of the stakes. My parents, Robert and Sarah, were seated across the room, their faces betraying little emotion. They had always been the picture of control, but now, I could see the cracks in their facade. The attorney they had hired, a stern-looking man in a dark suit, whispered something to them. It didn't matter what he said. The truth had already been laid out. My lawyer, a woman I had never met but trusted fully, stood up and addressed the judge. I could hear the confidence in her voice, the clarity in her words as she explained the situation, the documents, the facts. This wasn't just a legal matter. This was my story. This was my chance to finally be seen for who I was. As the proceedings continued, I couldn't help but glance over at my parents. They didn't look like the people who had raised me. Their eyes darted nervously, their posture stiff. I knew they were trying to hold on to whatever power they had left, but I could see the fear now. The fear that I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that dinner months ago. I wasn't the same person they thought they could control. The judge's voice broke through my thoughts, calling for a recess. I stayed seated as everyone around me stood up, a ripple of movement sweeping through the room. My lawyer turned to me with a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're doing well," she said quietly. "But remember, it's not just about the facts. It's about the bigger picture. You deserve this." I nodded, though her words weighed heavily on me. She was right. This was about more than just the legal battle. This was about reclaiming my life, about showing my parents that I was not their possession, that I was my own person, with my own worth. As I sat there, waiting for the recess to end, I couldn't help but think about all the years I had spent trying to please them. All the times I had bent over backward to keep the peace, to be the perfect daughter. But what had it gotten me? Nothing. I had given everything and received nothing in return. It was time to take back what was mine. When the break ended, I felt a new sense of purpose. I wasn't walking into that courtroom as a victim anymore. I was walking in as someone who had finally found her voice, someone who was ready to fight for herself. The hearing resumed, and as my lawyer presented more evidence, I sat there with a quiet resolve. This was it. The moment when everything changed. The moment when I took control of my story. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I had prepared for this moment for so long, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The courtroom was quiet. The only sound the shuffle of papers and the murmur of whispered conversations. My parents, Robert and Sarah, sat across the room, their expressions unreadable, but I could sense the tension in their posture. They knew this was coming. They knew they couldn't keep up the charade any longer. My lawyer had done her part, presenting the evidence, showing the court what they had tried so hard to bury. But now it was my turn. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on me. The judge looked at me, waiting. I cleared my throat and began to speak. "Your Honor, this case is not just about money or property. This is about something deeper. This is about family, trust, and respect. My parents made a decision that has changed the course of my life, and I have spent every moment since then trying to understand how they could do this to me. I have spent my entire life trying to make them proud, trying to be the daughter they wanted. But every step of the way, I was told I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough, not smart enough, not successful enough. Nothing was ever enough for them. I paused, feeling the eyes of the room on me. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to keep going. I know they think they've won. They think they've taken everything from me. But they don't realize that they've already lost. I'm not the person they think I am. I'm not the person they've tried to control all these years. I'm more than that. I looked across the room at my parents, my heart pounding in my chest. I've spent my life making sacrifices for them, always putting them first. But now, I'm putting myself first. I'm reclaiming my life, my identity, and my future. I'm not asking for their approval anymore. I'm not asking for their forgiveness. I'm taking what is rightfully mine. The room was silent. The judge nodded, and my lawyer gave me an encouraging look. I had said what I needed to say, and it was done. As I sat back down, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I had spoken my truth, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was hiding in the shadows. I had stepped into the light, and I wasn't looking back. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur, the details no longer matching. The decision was made, and as I left the courtroom, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I had taken back control. I had stood up for myself, and that was all that mattered. I didn't expect to hear from them so soon. A few days after the hearing, I received a call from Robert. My father, the man who had always been the pillar of our family, now sounded defeated on the other end of the line. "Lily, we need to talk," he said. I could barely recognize his voice, stripped of its usual confidence and authority. "I've been thinking about everything. Maybe we were wrong." I let his words hang in the air. I had prepared myself for this moment, the moment when they would finally come to realize what they had done. But hearing him say it, hearing the vulnerability in his voice, it stirred something deep inside me. I had spent years trying to get them to see me, trying to make them proud, and now, they were the ones reaching out. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What do you want, Dad?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "I want to apologize, Lily. We've made mistakes. We've treated you unfairly. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I want you to know that we were wrong." His words were not easy to hear. They were not the apology I had imagined over the years, but they were real. For the first time, my parents were acknowledging the hurt they had caused. "We don't want to lose you," Robert continued, his voice soft. "I know we've pushed you away, but we don't want to lose our family." I felt a wave of emotions flood through me. Anger, relief, confusion, all at once. It wasn't just about the money or the house anymore. It was about something deeper. About years of neglect, of love withheld, of a family that had fallen apart. I knew this was not going to be easy. Forgiveness didn't come overnight. But I also knew that I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to the anger that had weighed me down for so long. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "I'm not sure I can forgive you right now, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try. To rebuild what we've lost." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. And then Robert spoke again, this time with a small chuckle. "You've always been the strong one, Lily. I guess it's time we learn to be strong too." We didn't say much more after that. The conversation ended on a note of uncertainty, but there was a sense of peace in it. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt like I had taken control of my own destiny. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just someone they could walk all over. I had found my strength, and that was the first step toward healing. I had always believed that family could be repaired, that love could mend even the deepest wounds. But as the days passed after the call with Robert, I began to realize that healing wasn't going to be as simple as I had hoped. My parents had apologized, yes, but actions spoke louder than words, and for so many years, their actions had been the very definition of neglect and control. I wasn't sure if I could trust them again. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at them the same way, but I was determined to try. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about taking back control of my life and deciding what place they would hold in it. I needed to rebuild my sense of self, separate from the family that had torn me down. A week after the phone call, I agreed to meet with Robert and Sarah. We met at a small cafe, the kind that served strong coffee and had warm, worn-out chairs. The atmosphere felt right, the soft murmur of conversation around us helping to ease the tension. As I sat down at the table, I felt the weight of what was to come. There were so many things I wanted to say, but I didn't know where to start. I wasn't ready to forgive them yet, but I had to find a way to move forward. "Lily, we've been thinking about everything. We know we've hurt you, and we know it's going to take time for you to heal," Robert said, his voice quieter than I remembered. He looked older, more fragile somehow. His usual confidence was gone. We don't expect you to. Forgive us right away, Sarah added, her voice soft, almost pleading. But we want to try to make things right. I looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time in a long time. I had spent so much time hating them, resenting them for what they had done. But now, as I saw them sitting there, vulnerable and regretful, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something. I wasn't sure what it was. You can't undo the past, I said, my voice steady but with a hint of sorrow. You can't take back all the times you made me feel small, like I wasn't enough. All those years of trying to make you proud, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't even mine. They both looked at me, the guilt in their eyes palpable. I know, Sarah whispered. I know we can't undo it, Lily. But we're asking for a chance to start over. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. I wasn't sure if I ever could be. But I also knew that I couldn't keep carrying this anger. I couldn't keep holding on to the bitterness that had defined my relationship with them for so long. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. I didn't know if I could ever completely forgive them, but I knew I needed to try. For myself. I can't promise anything, I said slowly. But I'm willing to see where this goes. I'm willing to try, if you really are. They both nodded, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope in their eyes. It wasn't going to be easy, and I wasn't naive enough to think that everything would be perfect from here on out. But it was a start. A small step towards something better, something real. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that for the first time in a long time, I was in control of my own story. I had hoped that the meeting with Robert and Sarah would be a turning point, but in the days that followed, I began to see how deeply the scars ran. We had made progress, yes, but the past couldn't be erased with a few words of regret. The air in our interactions was still thick, with tension, and the old patterns were hard to break. They were trying, I could see that. But change didn't happen overnight. It was slow, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful. I continued with my life, focusing on my work, trying to keep myself occupied. But the calls and messages from my parents kept coming. At first, I ignored them. I wasn't ready for that kind of connection yet. I still needed space. But after a week, I finally picked up the phone. Lily. Sarah's voice came through, hesitant. We're trying, sweetheart. I know it's not enough, but we're trying. Her words hung in the air, filled with an emptiness I wasn't sure how to respond to. I know, I said quietly. But this is going to take time, Mom. I can't just go back to how things were before. You don't get to erase everything and expect me to fall in line. There was a pause. I understand, she said softly. We don't expect that, but we want to make things right. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window, feeling the weight of the conversation press against my chest. I wasn't sure if I could ever really trust them again, but I couldn't keep holding on to all the pain, either. I'm not asking for everything to be perfect, I continued. I just need to know that you're really willing to change. That you're not doing this because it's what you think I want to hear, but because you truly get it now. Another pause. And then, a quiet promise. We will. We'll show you, Lily. We'll show you we're serious. I didn't know if I believed them, but for the first time, I felt like there might be a chance. It wasn't easy. I could see my parents struggling to let go of their old ways, their control, their expectations. But I was learning, too. I was learning to set boundaries, to be clear about what I needed, and to protect my own heart. It wasn't about punishing them or seeking revenge anymore. It was about finding a new path for myself, one where I could be who I was, without apologies. That evening, I sat down to write. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to write freely, without the weight of other people's expectations. I wrote about everything, the anger, the sadness, the frustration. I wrote about the years I had spent trying to prove myself, trying to earn their love. And as I wrote, I felt a sense of release. I wasn't just writing words on a page. I was freeing myself. By the time I finished, I knew that whatever happened next, I had taken the most important step of all. I had taken my life back. No more waiting. No more seeking approval. I was done with that. It was time to live for myself. I spent the next few weeks in a state of careful reflection. Things had changed, yes, but not in the way I had expected. My parents, Robert and Sarah, had continued to reach out, trying to make amends, but their gestures felt almost too little, too late. There were no grand apologies, no magical moments of reconciliation. Instead, There were quiet, tentative steps, attempts at rebuilding a connection that had been broken for so long. But I wasn't sure I could trust them yet. I wasn't sure I even wanted to. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. It was about reclaiming who I was, about taking control of my own life, without constantly seeking validation from anyone else. I had spent so many years bending to their will, making myself smaller to fit into their expectations. But now, I was learning how to stand tall, how to carve out my own space, separate from the family that had held me in its grip for so long. One evening, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from my lawyer, but from Sarah. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. When I unfolded the letter, the words were simple, but they hit harder than I could have imagined. She apologized again, but this time, there was something different in her tone. She admitted that she had never truly understood the depth of the hurt she had caused. She wrote about the way she had pushed me, controlled me, without ever realizing how it had affected me. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't take away the years of pain, the years of sacrifice. But it was a start, a real one. And as I read her words, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about letting go of the power that the past had over me. It was about freeing myself from the anger that had consumed me for so long. But I wasn't ready to rush into anything. I wasn't ready to let them back in just yet. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about the actions that would follow. I needed to see if they were truly committed to changing, to making things right. So I took my time. I didn't rush to respond. I didn't make any promises. Instead, I spent my days focusing on what I needed. I spent time with friends, with people who saw me for who I truly was, not as the person they wanted me to be. Slowly, I started to feel the weight of the past lifting. I started to feel lighter, freer. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but I was learning to find peace within myself, to stop looking for it in other people's approval. A few weeks later, I finally called Sarah. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew it was time to take the next step. "I've thought a lot about what you wrote," I said, my voice steady. "And I appreciate it. I'm not sure what's next, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can start over. But it's going to take time. It's going to take trust." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might not say anything. But then she spoke, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you, Lily. That's all we've ever wanted. To have a chance to make things right." And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild. Maybe, just maybe, we could all start again. I spent the following weeks balancing my emotions, unsure of what path to take. My parents, Robert and Sarah, had shown an effort to mend the broken ties, but I remained cautious. The words of apology they offered felt genuine, yet they were only a small part of the larger picture. The real challenge would come in the form of their actions. I had given them space to prove themselves, but there was still a part of me that wondered if I could truly trust them again. There was no immediate rush for answers, no urgency to resolve everything overnight. Slowly, I began to engage with them again, though it was only in small, careful steps. We had dinner together a few times, not in the lavish setting of the past, but in a more modest, quiet way. Robert and Sarah had accepted the fact that things could not go back to the way they had been before. The meals were awkward at first, with pauses in conversation and hesitant glances exchanged, but with time, we managed to find a rhythm. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, Robert cleared his throat and said, "Lily, we know we can't undo what we've done, but we want to rebuild." I looked at him for a moment, unsure of how to respond. "We're not perfect," Sarah added softly, her voice thick with emotion, "but we're here, and we're trying." Her words struck me harder than I expected. She wasn't asking for forgiveness in that moment. Instead, she was acknowledging what had been lost. The truth was, I hadn't expected them to understand. I hadn't expected them to change in such a profound way. But here they were, admitting their mistakes and willing to make the effort. I knew that healing wasn't going to happen all at once, but it had started. "It's going to take time," I said quietly, "but I'm willing to see where this goes. I'm willing to try. For me, for us." The words felt heavy, but also freeing. I wasn't just saying them to placate anyone. I was speaking the truth. The following days brought more moments of reflection. I began to realize how much I had grown in the past few months. I had reclaimed parts of myself I didn't even realize I had lost. My parents were trying, and though I couldn't fully trust them just yet, I could see their effort. That was a start. I wasn't rushing into anything, but the cracks in our relationship were slowly starting to heal. As time passed, the conversations grew easier, the awkward pauses less frequent. I still didn't know if I would ever completely forgive them, and I wasn't sure if I ever could. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into that courtroom all those months ago. I had become stronger, more self-aware, and that strength, that peace, came from within me, not from anyone else's approval. The past didn't have the hold over me that it once did. I was learning to trust myself, and that was enough. I had hoped that things would slowly return to normal, but the reality was far more complicated. Robert and Sarah were trying, yes, but every step forward felt like 2 steps back. Their attempts at reconciliation were genuine, but it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me and how I had changed. I wasn't the person I was before the courtroom, before the endless years of manipulation and silence. I had learned to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and to stop letting the past control me. And that, in itself, was a victory. As the weeks passed, we found a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but we were building something different. Conversations with Robert and Sarah no longer felt like minefields. Instead of avoiding difficult topics, we slowly started to address them. I talked about the hurt, the disappointment, the years I had spent trying to be what they wanted. And they listened. For the first time in my life, they listened. But the question remained, could I forgive them? Could I really let go of the resentment that had built up over the years? One evening, as I sat in my apartment, I thought about everything. The court case, the phone calls, the awkward dinners. It had all led me here, to a place where I was no longer just a victim of my circumstances. I was in control, and yet, the past still lingered, like an old scar that wouldn't fully heal. I knew that forgiveness wasn't about excusing their behavior. It wasn't about pretending that everything was fine. It was about freeing myself from the burden of holding on to anger. I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't undo the hurt they had caused, but I could choose to let go of the anger that had kept me shackled to the past. I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah's number. When she answered, there was a pause, as if she too was waiting for something. "Lily," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for everything. I know I can't change what's been done, but I want to keep trying." I took a deep breath. "I'm not sure if I can forgive you yet," I said, "but I want to try. I want to try to rebuild, but it's going to take time. I need time." There was a long silence on the other end, and then, finally, Sarah spoke. "I understand. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'll keep trying, no matter how long it takes." That was all I needed to hear. It wasn't about them proving themselves. It was about me choosing to move forward, choosing to heal. It wasn't a perfect ending. It was a new beginning, one that I would have to fight for every day. But I was ready. I was ready to step into the future, no longer weighed down by the past. For the first time, I felt at peace with my decision. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was mine. And that was enough. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I reached over and glanced at the screen. It was a message from Sarah. "Can we talk?" it read. My heart skipped a beat. I had been dreading this moment, the moment when they would try to take too much, ask for too much. I knew I was still learning to navigate this delicate dance of rebuilding trust, but I wasn't sure how much more I could give. My hands trembled slightly as I typed my response, careful not to let my emotions dictate the words. "What do you need to talk about?" I hit send and waited. It felt like an eternity before the message came back. "I just want to make sure we're okay. I know it's been a long road, and I don't want you to feel like we're forcing anything." I read her words, the sincerity in them clear, and something inside me softened. It wasn't about whether we were okay yet. It was about getting to a place where we could be okay, someday. I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm not sure we're there yet, but we're getting there. I'm still trying to figure out what this new relationship looks like." After a long pause, Sarah's message came through again. "I understand, Lily. I just want you to know that we're not rushing you. We'll go at your pace." Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that not everything had to happen immediately. I didn't have to have all the answers right now. I could take things one step at a time, and I didn't have to carry the burden of the past alone anymore. As I put my phone down, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I had been afraid of this moment, afraid of opening myself up again, afraid of falling back into the old patterns. But this time, things felt different. I was no longer the person who would accept whatever was handed to me. I had learned to speak up, to set boundaries, and to honor my own needs. That wasn't something my parents could take away from me. I wasn't asking for perfection. I wasn't asking for a miraculous change overnight. I was asking for honesty, for consistency, for the kind of respect I had always given, but never received in return. I spent the rest of the day thinking about what I wanted from this new chapter. It wasn't about cutting ties or walking away. It was about forging a new path forward, one where I wasn't just a passive participant in my own life. I had found my voice, and now it was time to use it. The following days brought more calls, more tentative attempts at connection, and each time, I responded with the same sense of resolve. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't going to let the past dictate my future either. It was up to me to decide what place my parents would have in my life moving forward, and I was ready to choose. I woke up to a quiet morning, the sun shining through the blinds, casting a soft glow over everything in my apartment. It was a moment of peace, one that felt like the first breath after years of holding it in. I had been taking small steps, but each day brought me closer to something I hadn't thought possible: freedom. The freedom to choose my path, to be who I was without the weight of the past pressing down on me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I reached for it, not surprised to see it was a message from Sarah. "Can we meet for lunch today? I just want to talk." I didn't hesitate. I had made my decision. The uncertainty that once plagued me had begun to fade. I was ready to face this, ready to continue on this path of rebuilding, but now, it was on my terms. I replied, "Sure, let's meet." The restaurant was a small, quiet place, not far from where I lived. As I walked in, I saw Sarah already seated at a corner table, her hands nervously folded in front of her. She looked up as I approached, her face a mix of hope and apprehension. "Hi, Lily," she said, her voice tentative. "I'm glad you could make it." I sat down, giving her a small smile, but my mind was elsewhere. This wasn't just a casual meeting. This was the moment where we would either continue to move forward or go back to square one. "What's on your mind?" I asked, my tone neutral, but with a hint of curiosity. I don't want to make things harder," she began, her words careful, as if she was choosing each one. "I know it's been difficult, and I know I've made mistakes. I just want to make sure we're on the same page, that we're moving in the right direction." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to listen without the anger that had once clouded my judgment. "We are moving forward," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But it's going to take time. I'm still figuring out what that looks like for me." Sarah nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "I know. I'm not asking for everything to be fixed right away. I just wanted to make sure you knew I'm not giving up on us, on this family." I felt a knot in my chest loosen. It wasn't an easy thing to hear, and it wasn't an easy thing to admit, but the words were enough. They weren't perfect, but they were real. And for the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something new. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But I had already taken the hardest step, letting go of the past, and choosing to move forward. As we sat there, talking quietly, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. It wasn't the perfect resolution, but it was a beginning. It was a start to something different, something that I could control. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel burdened by expectations. I felt free.